Good evening, welcome to MOTS presents MOTS Ado About Nothing.
MOTS Ado About Nothing. MOTS Ado About Nothing.
Where we apply the revolutionary MOTS scale to classic and contemporary literature.
MOTS Ado About Nothing. MOTS Ado About Nothing.
This podcast contains mature content, spoilers, language. You have been warned. I'm so glad Steve was not here tonight. Oh, welcome back to MOTS Ado About Nothing. My name is Jonathan Manzer. I'm here with Scott.
Heyo.
Beth.
Hello.
And Chris.
Good evening.
And we're going to be discussing Sonny's Blues by James Baldwin. Scott, we're going to start with you. Oh, does anyone want to give a synopsis of this first?
I think you should, my friend.
Okay. This was my choice. This is a love letter to jazz and blues. This is what the jazz is all about. Mm. And it's about a older brother who's kind of a square, I suppose we would say, who is more successful in life than his younger brother. And while his younger brother had been to prison, had a heroin addiction, but is a successful and popular jazz pianist. And it really discusses the older brother discovering what makes his younger brother tick, Sonny. What Sonny and the passion that Sonny has for his music and the meaning it provides to his life. That's kind of absent in the older brothers. But anyway, nonetheless, Scott, the beginning, the introduction, what did you think?
I'm going to give it a 1 on this one. I like it was a good setup, sort of a classic one. It's something you can use almost always. The nameless brother, by the way, he never has a name. We'll discuss that later. But the protagonist, unnamed narrator, gets a letter informed that his brother Sonny has been busted. Picked up for heroin use, I believe that is. Mm-hmm. And so then it sort of like sets him on a soul-searching mission almost. So, and his feelings, the way he describes his feelings early on after having seen it, he has to go, he's a high school teacher, his character, has to go teach a class, and he's like sort of turning that knowledge, information over in his head. So I thought that was like the opening page or two. So if you take that as introduction, I'm going to say yes, it was effective, it did get me. I was interested to see what was going to happen next, or how his path went on.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a 1 also. And the way it was done, when I think he started out, like the first time I read it was on the bus. I don't remember the exact quote, but then
Subway,
and then the second I reread it, and then I read it again. But he doesn't tell you what he read for like a little while.
That's true.
Like so, you're like, what did this guy read? So a little bit like there's a little bit like, oh God, I'm being manipulated, and I'm kind of getting annoyed about this. But I was already there. Like I was like I really wanted to know what was happening. So. Definite 1 for me. I was hooked.
I agree. It is sort of manipulation. They start out with,
like I said, it's going to be effective largely. It's set up. Yes. It's a good trope, anyways.
They set it with a piece of action, a mystery for that you want to, and then go back into the history to discuss how these characters ended up where they are. They set it at a piece of action in a sense at first, or as much of an action
versus the rest
has. But what really drew me in initially is the older brother's point of view on the world and how kind of cynical and bitter and mean-spirited he is to everyone around him. And I was actually more interested in seeing this character and how he interacted with the world than necessarily figuring out what the mystery would be. And that's what really captured, like, why is this successful individual so, like, just terrible
jaded.
Of a person. Yeah.
Sure.
So
I was kind of I wanted to get past this character and find out what the mystery was, because even from the beginning I was like, this guy's just kind of mean-spirited is a good way to describe him. I was like, I want to find out what's going on. I don't necessarily know if I want to stay in this guy's head, because he just seems to me someone I don't want to be around.
But you stay with him.
Oh yeah.
And we'll get into that later. But however, nonetheless, I have to give it a 1. Chris?
I'm giving it a 1. Full disclosure, I read this freshman English in college, and
during the jazz age itself,
which was 27 years ago, and I was a music major. I'll get into the how much I agree with Ian on blues and jazz. I know as a music major in college, but right away, there's 2 things I remember reading in college: Sonny's Blues and The Rocking Horse Winner, and the latter was lame, but this one was excellent. So I was really excited when Ian suggested it, and 27 years later, I read the first sentence again. and I'm immediately hooked. It's got a very strong one. James Baldwin's got a very fluid. His writing is very fluidic. He's crazy. I love him.
On that note, I also read it in college, more recently than Chris, and I fell in love with it. And you said you had the musician connection. I had a writer's connection to it. I felt that the parallels worked there of trying to. But we'll get into themes later. Nonetheless, I feel that the creative types will be more drawn to this story than perhaps those who are represented by Sonny's brother. Nonetheless, on to the next part. Beth, was the work totally consistent throughout?
I will say yes, so I will give it a 1. I often find short stories to just be claustrophobic. Like, I feel like there's not enough room in them
to breathe,
just
maybe
immerse and swim around in the world that it creates. So, and this one in particular, because I was kind of in the head of a narrator I didn't really like. I found him to be unsympathetic. Not that I couldn't sympathize with him, but that he was unsympathetic towards everyone else. So I didn't necessarily want to see the world through his perspective. And I found it a little bit disturbing to see the world through his perspective.
Unsettling,
but
perhaps.
Uncomfortable. It totally worked. I mean, I was in his head. The world looked the way James Baldwin wanted it to look to me for the time that I read the story. So, totally effective. And I will give it a 1.
I absolutely agree with what you said. I'm going to try to build off of it a little bit. Kind of, I feel 4 sections in this. You have the initial introduction in his, and you get to see who this, the protagonist is, Sonny's brother. You have the past history with the parents and with Sonny as they develop the world around him. Then you have kind of Sonny's return from prison and the revival. And I get what you said, but I think that it was intended to be claustrophobic, even more so than a short story. That, especially when they're discussing the parents in the house and as they can see all the terrible things that happened and their impending deaths and trying to shield the children from this terrible world they live in. He does a phenomenal job of making you feel as trapped as these families do.
It wasn't a pleasant feeling, but that was his intention. Yes. I wasn't supposed to feel happy.
The tone was not happiness, but he kept it.
And then the following scene, when you're dealing with the street revival outside, in the present day of the story, it's a little bit lighter of a mood. Still cynical because the main character is incredibly, to the point of abrasive, to the point of cynicism. But again, even though it is a slightly lighter mood, it still captures that darkness is
it's pessimistic as well.
Theme throughout, and it captures that tone perfectly of nothing's ever going to be right in the world. So I have to say, I have to give it a very strong 1 for this. Chris?
I'm going to give it a strong 1 as well. What you were saying, a lot of what you were saying, I immediately thought of the street revivalists, where he was watching how the music. I don't want to give too much away at the end yet because we're not probably there, but how he accepts Sonny at the end, how he gets into Sonny's world, is really foreshadowed or given reason for the narrator to get there, because he's watching how the music affects people. He sees the cook from the barbecue place. He sees the woman who's elated, but she can see that she is a broken and literally beaten woman, and the businessman, and that when it comes, the businessman's ready to give a change to the tambourine, and the cook just puts a cigarette out and walks away. It's just how the music affects them, and what happens after the music stops. It just gets a strong 1. It's just tonally consistent. He just gets these themes and he builds on them, and it's just phenomenal work.
Right, Scott?
Fair enough, yes. I'm going to mostly agree. I won't have much more to say, but I'll speak a little bit about it. I'm going to give it a 1. It was totally consistent. As you said, Ian, earlier, it's a love letter to jazz, essentially, and as Beth also just said, that in the reality that it existed in, that wasn't always a pleasant reality, so it presents you with sort of a harsh truth, but nevertheless, it's the world that they're living in. Yes, as you said, how it affects the people who are immersed in this world, and I think it was completely consistent throughout.
And every story, every little texture, every little nuance.
Yes,
from Sonny's friend, with whom the narrator shares a cigarette with at the beginning, to the stories of his parents and the stories mom tells, and the story within a story. Everything, it's just magnificent. Every little thing builds on one another. It's just phenomenal.
But it's magnificent. It's brutal at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I like that.
It's this world that, as kind of white middle class individuals, we will never see the things of you're seeing your sibling driven down by a group of racists looking for a for kicks. You know, these are awful, powerful imagery throughout the entire story.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We meant to scare him, but we actually killed him. Okay, keep going. And you're right, but by the same time, he's showing all these horrors, and it's such a bittersweet story because he's showing this world that we're never going to understand.
It's a window into it, but you'll never know what it's like.
Right, we as 20th century, 21st century white middle class Americans, we're never going to understand what it was like to be a man of color or a woman of color back in the 40s and 50s.
Even nowadays.
Or even nowadays, yeah. I mean, I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know what it's like to be anything but, middle class white guy.
But a dork, go on.
Yeah, but by the same token, a theme we're going to get to later.
Yes.
In terms of being a musician and a writer, the level of eccentricity, that's really played out in Sonny's character. But one of the things that makes this bittersweet is the city of New York is kind of, I've got a love-hate relationship with. And at the same time, there's all this horror. He's also showing the beauty, just the aesthetic. That when he and Sonny are coming back and they're driving in the taxi and Sonny wants to take a longer route to see the city, that you can imagine downtown. Yeah, some of this is the way it is. Some of this is the way we remember it. Some of this is the way, it's romanticized. But with all the bad and all the horror, he also gives, the beauty of the world as well.
Mm. Well, on that note, we're going to move on to a subject we were just talking about, themes. And overall, as I said before, this is a love letter to the blues and to the jazz. And this still has one of the most powerful, kind of ending scenes of all when it is described. I think it's a great juxtaposition between the revival, which is a musical thing, and the main character describing how all of the people are coming out just by habit. That they know that the preacher and the singers are all routine, just as corrupt and live as hard of lives. That we just go. They just go through this for the motion, and then having it played off the scene where Sonny's actually playing music and their real emotion is captured there. It sends a shiver down my spine every time I read it. I've read it numerous times now, but it still manages to capture that emotion in me. So you have the themes of darkness throughout, which is it's interesting. The main character is theoretically successful. He has a wife and children. He's a school teacher. Yet he chose not to move out of Harlem. He chose to live in the same neighborhood he grew up. And he says, even though he has a negative opinion about his childhood, he wants his kids to have the same childhood he had.
Experiences, he does mention that.
Yeah, even though he's theoretically successful, he's still trapped. Where his brother, who he looks down upon for the majority of this, managed to get out. He is angry. He has no outlet to express his frustration in the world. He has come to become a part of the cog of the world. And is still angry, is still needs that outlet, but he doesn't have any. Religion failed them, and here you have a character named Sonny who's troubled, who made poor choices, but has found a way to provide sanctuary for the lost souls that he sees it, not only for himself, but to provide a brief happiness for others through turning his misery into powerful music. And I don't know, it's just an
affecting piece.
Beautiful story. And it's touching, and it's brutal, and it has at that core, though, for all the darkness it shows you, it has at its core the tiniest bit of light that gives you hope for the future. Even if Sonny and Sonny's brother really don't have hope for themselves. So, that if you haven't gotten it, I'm giving it a 1. And Chris, would you like to?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 1. I'm trying to put together everything you said because I agree with you. I think there's actually a considerable amount of light in it. It may be neon blue and red and green, but there is light. I was thinking about something you said about people going through the motions, and there's a line in here I was looking at. I was looking for where in the Blues Club, Sonny takes off. He kind of finds his voice and all this when they finally say, "Stop being this." And from a musician's perspective, I'm thinking he's going from the standard blues and jazz, which he had already scoffed at earlier, into probably something more dissonant. He was talking about Charlie Parker. He's probably getting to what Parker's later work and some of the stuff that Train was doing. There's a line here I've been able to find where it said the audience the audience applauded after it, and
some of it was real.
Some of it was real. In other words, they all applauded, and some of them got what Sonny was doing, and some of them didn't. And I'm just going to gush over this like you. It's getting a strong one. I could dissect this one scene for hours. Mm-hmm. But one thing he said about his brother was that the narrator really did start to see through Sonny's perspective. I just realized I'm going to jump the gun on that, so I'll stop there.
I think I know what you're going to say, but I'll answer. I'm not going to gush as much about it. I enjoyed the story, yes, but sort of saw something we talked about in an earlier cast, that it's not my number one genre. It just wouldn't be my number one pick. Mm-hmm. But given that, I did enjoy it overall. And yes, I think it did address its themes very well. And like sort of the desperate situations that people are in, but yet they still find... some of them can find comfort, or at least an outlet, as Ian was saying, to express, even if it's the blues, at least they have an outlet by which to channel their emotions and their experiences. And yes, I think the ending is very moving, and we'll discuss that shortly. But you can mark me down as a 1, because I think it did work well within its genre. As you said, it's a love letter to jazz, so I think it explored that and sort of gave you the window into that world very well done.
Mm-hmm. And Beth?
I agree that it was effective within its genre. I also agree with Scott. It's not my first pick. Like, it's not a story I would have just read on my own for my own pleasure. I don't think it's actually meant to be read for anyone's pleasure, but genre is a strange word to use here because it's literary short story, which is not what you think of when genre is usually reserved for
broader terms, maybe
science fiction
it's a
or
drama,
fantasy,
if you would think of it as such. And I think it's very effective as a very dark drama.
I agree. If it's that one,
right, it's difficult to say. I mean, I definitely think it's effective within its genre, and I will give it a very strong 1. It's the more difficult question for me would be if I actually liked it, because I didn't find it comfortable to be in these characters' heads, in these characters' world. And again, I don't think you were meant to. But
I think that's a theme. Like, you don't have to like it, you just have to be confronted with it.
Right, so I definitely think it's effective, and I'm glad I read it. I feel like I've learned something. I don't mean to sound patronizing about that, but I feel like I've learned something in reading it, and I've gained from reading it. So I'm glad I read it. And I kind of regret that I wouldn't have read it on my own. So all of that just to say a strong 1 on that question.
All right, now, Chris, the ending, what'd you think? We've already kind of discussed it a little bit, but...
Did the work achieve its goals at the end? I was just making notes on that because I knew it was next. This is getting an extremely strong 1, and something you and I were talking about was I was thinking about Sonny at the end and imagining what kind of literal music he was playing. That instead of standard jazz, which is very tonal, he would be playing like more of an atonal, more dissonant music. So I was thinking about it in terms of themes, where you're introduced with a narrator who's a square, and when Sonny says he wants to do jazz, he's just like, oh, like standard jazz. You're Duke Ellington. You're Louis Armstrong. He's like, yeah, Dixieland. He's like, no. And you can kind of and he brings up Charlie Parker, and you see the brother who's the narrator seeing world in order. Doesn't really, he sees the bad, but there's a certain amount of optimism in his criticism. And then you've got Sonny, who literally does whatever he does, joining the Navy to get away from Harlem. That he does heroin to get away from life. And when you bring his music and he's just kind of going through the motions, and the other musicians pull back and don't really know what they're doing but start following Sonny. You get a sense that he's moving towards this dissonance, that life is dissonance, that there's going to be good, that there's going to be bad, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be contradiction, there's going to be paradoxes. And I think that the applause at the end, whether they meant it or not, and the fact that he gives Sonny a drink and Sonny takes a sip and puts on the thing, and basically like a halo forms. I mean, there's this acceptance, there's this understanding, and I think the way he ties in the music and he ties in, to the conclusion, to all the themes consistently throughout, it's just absolutely amazing to me.
I actually, after finishing it, this was the third time I read it. I never actually checked it out. I listened to I Am Blue, which is what he is playing during.
Did they mention that outright? I
guess
they
they
did. You're right. Okay.
And it surprised me. It wasn't what I pictured in my head that he was playing, but it still fit.
It's his version of it, of course.
I listened to Ray Charles's version of it, or what have you. But no, Scott, would you have to?
Yes, I will answer. I'm going to agree with the guys. You show your passion for it, and doesn't I disagree? I giving it a 1. Possibly, it's actually the strongest section in the story for me. That one scene sort of says it all and like shows you. You're going back to what we said. Here is the experience that you get, and I think we'll go into it soon enough. But let me just touch on it. The narrator himself becomes alienated, and he is no longer in his element. He's seeing the element that his brother is in, and therefore it's a very affecting ending. He gets a glimpse of that into him.
He's put in a dark corner.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. You're
literally.
Right.
Yeah,
for sure. And like again, we just mentioned this line, but I thought that probably again was one of my favorite lines where people started applauding, and some of it was real. Like like you're right. They usually don't they're just applauding out of habit, but this time, at least when Sonny is playing this piece and the way he's playing it, it actually is affecting his audience, who has become so jaded, otherwise, that it at least produces some kind of spark in them. So yeah, 1 for me.
Well, I mean, when Sonny was staying with the wife and her parents, when the narrator was at war, and it said that Sonny knew he was there because of the brother, not because these people cared about him on his own.
They didn't want him, but
that was really difficult for him. And he said it was something that he always just knew and had a hard time getting over. So then at the end, his brother was in the position that he had been forced to be in before he was like mature enough to just go off on his own. So it kind of was a reversal of roles. And another thing, like, I thought the ending was very powerful, and it's not that it was the first time music has been described that way as a conversation between the musicians, but it did it in such an effective way. Like, they never really talked about the first
metaphor use, but
the
way
music
he
itself.
Used it,
like, it was like, and then I don't remember what the
They were like, he was like swimming out to shore, dipping his toes, and then they let him go.
It was a conversation, and I just found that fascinating. But it made me think, Sonny has no choice but to be in the world and experience it firsthand and like be immersed in the world. Like, he's not built in such a way that he can be detached. The narrator, the brother, from the very beginning, he's detached from everything. He's reading the story about his brother, and that's how it starts. He read the story, and then he's in his classroom, and then his students go, and he's watching them from a window. It's the epitome of he's detached. He's watching the other teachers walk through the playground, and the teachers are rushing. They just want to get home. They want to not be in this place. And he sees that, and he doesn't realize that that's also him. Like, he's kind of living a life that he's not involved in so much. And you get the feeling that he's detached from everything, whereas his brother is just not detached. His brother is in the thick of everything, and they just deal with the world in very different ways. So,
odd about that is that he thinks his brother is detached from the world.
Right, because his brother's kind of escaping from it the way he sees it.
So it's kind of, again, the reversal of roles.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I like that.
So again, my answer is 1.
Well, you've already heard me speak at length about this. I think it's absolutely a beautiful ending. Again, sends shivers down. I've read it like 3 times. Each time it gets me, and I have to say that that's hell of an ending.
Sure.
Hell of an ending. All right. Anyway, now we're on to characters. Scott, Antagonist.
Well,
go on.
This is again a little kind of a bizarre one to apply, but here's what I came up with. Right, I think the main character is the antagonist in a sense. So, this is going to flow into the questions. So I know we're just supposed to be discussing that one, but Sonny becomes a protagonist. So there's, as we just said, they reverse roles.
I mean, he's the title character.
Yes, but you could also argue, and to bring it back to another cast we did, that perhaps life's harsh realities are also the protagonist. The antagonist. Like, you have to deal with the uncomfortable, situations in life, and what you're even your circumstances that you were raised in and live in. So I think the harsh reality of the world maybe is the antagonist, and that's always going to be a 1 because nobody can escape that. And this is the story about them dealing with it or trying to escape it, but not quite, or escaping it in any way they possibly can, which I think was a line or close to it in the story itself. So if you take that to be it, I'm going to give it a 1.
I think whether you take that to be it or whether you take either Sonny or his brother to be the antagonist, because you could choose anyone.
I agree with that too, yeah.
If you have the narrator as the protagonist, then Sonny's kind of the antagonist. And if you have Sonny as the protagonist, then the brother is almost definitely the antagonist. And I think any way you kind of interpret it works. So it's a 1 no matter how you interpret it. And it's also kind of fascinating that it works all 3 ways.
Even if you can get whichever one you choose to be it. Yeah, true.
So that's like a strength. So it should get an extra 1. I don't know.
Nope, binary.
White people.
Yeah.
Except for the father, who definitely did have. I actually like the very interesting quote where it says that after the father's brother had been killed, every single white person he saw was the man who killed his brother.
I agree with that. That's an amazing line.
Yes, and it's quite chilling, and you can understand his hatred, but where racism is born there. But it definitely is, in a sense, the darkness. It's the shit we have to deal with as we go through life, and all the troubles you have to carry on you, and how you and in a sense, it's everyone. The entire protagonist is people dealing with and how you deal with the problems. That's the main conflict. Sonny used heroin. That was his antagonist for a very long time,
true, yeah.
And he found salvation through music. The brother he dealt with the darkness by creating an ivory tower which he sat upon and judged everyone
very much
around
agree
him
with that, yeah.
as the darkness that could drag him down, but not his brother. I mean, his brother, but not his brother. It was kind of he couldn't rationalize that in his mind.
Cognitive dissonance.
And he was saved through his brother's music as well. Whether it's the mother or the father, however, it's how you deal with the tragedy of your life, and that's something that speaks beyond time.
Nobody can escape
beyond race,
that.
beyond anything. It's what we have to deal with. Chris,
I'm giving this a very strong 1, and I'm thinking about the story, and it's really hard not to answer this question and not answer the next 2 questions.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say this. I to much Ian's point about the way Sonny and the narrator see the world and deal with it in 2 different ways. I was going to say, at first it said denial, but they escape the world, one in his ivory tower through a detachment. He detaches himself, mentally, and Sonny detaches himself through drugs. He's connected to the world when he sees it through music and does his music and is himself. But if he can't, he escapes through drugs, whereas his brother escapes through detachment.
Actually, an interesting point to that. The only reason the older brother connects with Sonny is because his daughter died. So once the troubles of life, once came
they crossed
over his ivory tower, it finally brought him down
point.
to reality where he could once again understand
engage
who his brother
at
was.
least.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even his telling you that his daughter died, it was so just like,
It was all
and then Gracie died.
It was matter of fact.
And it came in context with the fact that his brother wrote him before he wrote he wrote Sonny.
Yes.
It's just like, it was very much, oh, by the way.
But to the when his mother is talking about their father, the fact that he didn't show his pain at all except to her. In a sense, the narrator's a similar way too.
Yeah,
that
true.
like yes, he says it in a very detached, but he has to. So that's how he deals with the pain the same way their father did.
Yeah.
With
Good point. Yeah.
I just didn't get the feeling that he even let it show with the wife, because when he talked about after the daughter died, the wife would wake up crying and he would comfort her, but he never dealt with it himself, it seemed like. That's why I found him just to be like a cold kind of almost not human. Like, it didn't seem
Distant as hell. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Not even with the father, not even with the Sonny's and the narrator's father seemed to have like at least a soft side that someone saw.
Yeah.
This guy didn't seem to even have that.
All right.
So we're moving on to the protagonist now, and Beth, it's on you.
A one again, but I think I said everything in the last time. The main character could either be Sonny or the narrator,
Whoever you call it as
or
such.
just the bigger world that they're living in. So it works. Like, it's a one.
I think it's both the Sonny and Sonny's brother, kind of going along parallel paths.
Yeah. Okay.
And that they, in a sense, they needed each other, but I guess the other brother
They didn't
more
want to acknowledge
so
it, but they realized
than
it.
Sonny to actually get like to the place they needed to be in the world. And although you're right, the protagonist is an awful person. I think that James Baldwin kind of exaggerated for the purpose of point, to show that, in a sense, kind of, I think, give maybe to the people who doubted him, to who he felt was, this is how I view you. This is how I view the people who've criticized my choices in life. This is how I view, like, so you think I'm crazy, you think I'm Sonny, but here's how you appear
like
to me.
Yeah.
So I think that cold callousness is for a point
Part of
there,
the point,
to show the idea that like, in a sense, that square world that wants to have a 9-to-5 job and then has its issues as well and denies a lot of things. So again, it's for a point.
Yeah.
So I have to give it a 1. But
It's not that I like he's not an awful person. He's just, because he doesn't do anything actively. It's terrible. He doesn't do anything actively at all. He just seems like the kind of person that would let horrible things happen around him without doing anything.
what's worse, the bad man or the good man who lets bad men get away with
Nothing
it?
is.
Chris?
This is getting a 1.
Okay.
I think most of what I'm going to say that's going to justify the last point and this point are probably going to come when we discuss supporting characters. But as protagonists and antagonists, the greater world, Sonny, and the narrator are very, very effective. And I'll wait till the next question to finish.
All right. So it's on me. I will give it a 1 too. I like it. Like, I think you sort of convinced me or made a good point there. They're both the protagonists, really. Like, you get both ends of the story, and even if they switch, that means they're still both the protagonists. If one wasn't before, then he is now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like the Mad Max thing that we've check out the Mad MOTS cast, where I said the same thing about what happened to the characters in that film. But I agree with that. So they get a 1. When they switched, at first, one's the protagonist. The brother will be a 1, and then when Sonny becomes the protagonist, essentially, he also gets a 1.
All right, we're on to supporting characters. Now, I was actually initially going to give this a 0, oddly enough, even though I chose the story. Because there aren't really many strong supporting characters in this.
Hold on, real quickly. By your own scale, you must pick one. If one, you're going to say...
But I convinced myself in my own mind to give this a 1. By saying that the world that James Baldwin builds, Harlem itself is a character.
All right, fair enough.
And all the little... while there's no really standout characters that really draw me in. I like Creole, the band leader, the
That's
fiddler.
his name.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I like the mother for the purpose she serves as kind of the religious, that old school, like the previous generation and how they dealt with it. But I have to say, Harlem has like a total of like the revival, the the drug addicts, and all the like issues that go on there. It's actually kind of like the sum is greater than its parts in a sense, and so I have to give it a 1 for that. Chris,
this is getting a very, very strong 1 because to me, there would be no character development without the secondary characters because all the supporting characters act as mirrors. Because when you have a narrator,
I like that.
You only see the world from his perspective, but you only see him through the perspective of others. Sonny, you see Sonny's perspective through the narrator and through his dialogue with Sonny and through Sonny's actions. But you get the bigger picture from the secondary characters. I was specifically thinking about the mother's story about the father and the father watching his brother get killed and how his father thought of all white people. He only saw white people as the man who killed his brother, and that he never let his guard down, let himself be emotional unless it was around his mother, and that you can really see the narrators like his father to the point where he won't even show that side to his wife. And then the mother says to him, he's more in touch with the real world for the good, bad, and different. It's like, take care of Sonny. So it really gave you a sense that, she really understood Sonny, and she really understood that, her son was emulating more her father, that Sonny was emulating more her, and he was definitely giving a message saying, like, this is the dynamic in your life. You need Sonny as much as he needs you. And then getting onto, like you said, Creole, the band leader, and the various members of the band and the audience and the street, the people in the street and the people the street revivalists, the musicians and the people listening to the musicians, and Sonny's friend and the school children out the window. Without all these things, without Harlem itself, without all these little flavors, you would not ever get a sense of really who the narrator was, a really complete picture of who Sonny was, where Sonny was at. I'm going to make an argument that the secondary characters are just as important every step of the way. There's not a wasted secondary character, even if it's in a passing mention, even if it's Sonny saying he wants to take a longer way home, and the city itself being a character. This story just excels with the rest of the world and every supporting character.
Amen, brother.
Yes, so...
Can you tell I was holding that back for like 10 minutes?
Yeah, you were waiting to say that. It was clear and well said, for sure. So I'll agree with you guys. I'll keep it a little bit shorter because he basically said everything. Without having Harlem as a character itself, you need to count that as a supporting character. And within that, as sort of sub-supporting characters, secondary characters are everything that is in the city. So the revival thing, and you get the history of his family and what happened there and everything else. I would count heroin and music perhaps as secondary characters itself.
Absolutely.
And all of those, as I just said, filter into...
the beer can.
Yeah, filter into the atmosphere. Exactly. Yes, all that filters into the atmosphere itself. And without that, it needs that to draw you into the world and to explain, the character's motivation and what their mindsets and perspectives are. So, mark it 1, dude.
Will do. Beth?
Okay, this one... I feel like some of the supporting cast, they're... And I mean this in, like, a good way, actually. They're sort of cliche, but in a way that they should be, like, because he can't, in a short story, you're not going to be able to spend 10 pages on the mother's character and on the Sonny's friend who he meets outside the school.
The classic shady guy hanging around the school.
Right, and the band in the end. So he uses kind of stereotypes, at least from our perspective reading it today, which is like 40 or 50 years after the story comes out. But so it's in a way sort of cliche, but in the way that cliches should be used as a tool.
Good use of cliches.
Yes, it's a good use without having to flesh out these characters because you're too busy with the 2 main characters. So I'm giving it a 1, even though the characters themselves may not be as uniquely individual as they would be in, say, a longer work. As
you're dealing with the first-person narrative, I think that a lot of these characters are meant to be, because he
That's
They're
how
sort
he
of
used them.
archetypes.
He views them as
Yeah.
cliches
I guess
themselves.
archetype would be a better word.
The narrator himself admits that the heroine act he meets at the beginning, he never even considered the fact that he had a story.
They had troubles of his own.
Yeah.
So like, again, he
I mean,
views
he
people.
says this boy who looked like Sonny. He almost called him
Right,
Sonny.
just real quick, they're archetypes to the reader, but to the character, they're cliches. So they're
Yeah.
described as such. Good.
But I was going to say, this reminds me of what we were talking about in a previous podcast when we were talking about Nightfall. Whereas that story, by today's standards, that story would be, hey, this is, indicative of science fiction. It's everything that it did well, that it's done well for the last 60 years. Over 60 years, if we're going back. It's the same thing. At the time, this was different. This was new. That, yes, they were cliches. Yes, they were stereotypes. But they hadn't worked their way into the archetype thing. So while these, yes, as you said, Beth, these are now archetypes, they still serve their function. And it's...
I believe this story was mid to late 50s.
57.
57. So again, that's what, 50,
Sure.
60 years ago?
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
And as I said, I use the word cliche, but I use it with reservation because I know it has a negative
Without the
connotation.
connotation that it's usually
I didn't
has.
mean it in a negative way. I just
Sure.
meant it's a character type that we know what this character is there for. We know the purpose of the characters that he's introducing without a bunch of background explanation. We just understand who this is supposed to be. And that's not a weakness. It works as a strength in this particular story. I guess I just wanted to mention it, but it gets a strong one because I found the mother and does the shady character even have a name? Sonny's
I
friend.
don't think he knows.
Okay.
That's the whole point. Like he doesn't care about
He's
his
kind of
name.
fascinating also because he said I never gave your brother anything, but I told him it was good. Like I told him I liked the way it made me
Just mention
feel,
he felt more guilty
and he
than
felt bad about that.
the brother did.
Yeah, and so
That's
he
true.
had you knew he had a story. And he was actually quite interesting. So that definitely gets a 1 for me.
All right. Chris, dialogue.
Yeah, this is going to get a 1. This is very character driven. The dialogue is important because it's storytelling from beginning to end. Because by definition, it being in a first person, you can kind of see the whole narrative as dialogue.
It's basically all
That's
dialogue.
true.
It is all dialogue. And then the dialogue within the dialogue, talking to Sonny's friend, talking to Sonny, talking to his own mother, the story within a story there. I mean, it's just all, it's a strong one.
Fair enough. So see, here's the thing. I'm going to give it a 1 in the end. I was going to give it a 0 to start out with, but because of what you just said, because as I thought about it more and more as we talked about it, because it's a first-person perspective, of course it's all like the actual dialogue. Maybe this again is a sign of the times. Like to me, felt like a little flat. Like, but they're talking to each other and like, hey, it just seemed like almost. I don't mean this. It was Dan Brownish to me at the time because they're just saying what they're saying. It's not interesting, but it's interesting because of the whole everything else that's been built around it. So therefore, in that sense, it's almost a character unto itself. And it is informed by the world, and the world is informed by it, in fact. So, in that sense, and for those reasons, I will give it a 1.
Beth?
I'm also going to give it a 1. And I saw the whole thing kind of as almost a monologue. So it felt like dialogue the whole way through. But then there were times when I thought it was effective in the beginning, before Sonny got busted and went to rehab and prison and everything, he said when the two brothers were talking and he was trying to sort of suss out what Sonny's interests were, and he says, "Oh, you mean Louis Armstrong?" And then he was like, and I could see in Sonny's face that I had just kind of broken his heart a little bit, but I don't remember his exact words, but that was dialogue to me because it was
the detail
wasn't
that he was
speech,
describing
but it
to
was
you.
it was a conversation in the same way that the music at the end is a conversation. So even the parts that weren't necessarily within quotations and dialogue, I just found it all very effective and memorable. So I would give it a 1.
I'm going to get poetic here for a moment. Excuse me. I think this is about as much as what was said as what wasn't said by the protagonist.
Fair enough.
And that you hear the failure to communicate in everything. That I wish I could talk to Sonny. I wish I know I said the wrong
I tried
thing
to
here.
and then failed. Yeah.
My wife is so much better at talking to people than I am about being friendly. It's and you see from his point of view everything he wants.
It's a dialogue that has a commentary about
about his
failures of dialogue. Yeah.
Actually reminds me a little bit of I started reading Ulysses by James Joyce, and they have a character there who's very loquacious, I suppose.
Yes. Getting poetic.
And he his thoughts are beautiful. His thoughts are incredibly very poetic. Yet he can't say any of that in his real
his daily interactions.
So I feel like that captures it. And also, even though the dialogue isn't snappy and witty and all that, I feel it's very realistic. It's
right. That's what I sort of convinced myself of, and I agree with that.
Yeah. I feel like I could actually see these people talking in real life and failing to communicate as people often do in real life. So I have to give this a strong 1. All right, Scott. Immersion. Was it broken? Was it kept?
I believe it, was kept. I'll give it a 1. Nothing was jarring. Nothing ever broke my vision. In fact, it probably, as we said, and I'll just condense it again, that's the strength of this story. The world is built so believable and convincingly that you're pretty much sucked into it. And, especially, again, the ending scene is fucking haunting. And I think that is, the most effective thing. Everything builds up to being so affecting. So yeah, there's nothing happened. There was no weird out of place lines or actions the characters taken or even exchanges between them. So I'll give this a perfectly solid 1. It was convincing throughout.
Beth?
I'll give it a 1 too. I don't have much to say, so it's my shortest answer of the
Immersion was never broken. So 1.
Yeah, I was Scott. You said it perfectly, so I have nothing to add. Chris?
I'm giving it a 1.
Okay, well that was I think the shortest one we ever had. All right, Beth, the final question: would you recommend this story?
I would definitely recommend it. The question of whether it was enjoyable is slightly more difficult because it was just so uncomfortable, just the situation. And again, I've said this how many times? It's not enjoyable in the sense that it's a happy story, but it doesn't have to be. So I'm giving it a 1. And I wanted to mention something that I hadn't been able to mention before. That when he sends the drink to his brother at the end, and there's that glass of the scotch and milk, which sounds terrible, but it's sitting on the top of the piano, and he talks about how it's just there, and the lights are shining on it, and it's kind of glowing, and it's vibrating from the motion of the piano. It's the only way he could be a part of his brother's world, actually in his brother's world,
that's interesting.
without
I like that,
being external to it. It's his only
connection
to it, and that drink is his sort of avatar, and it's his entrance into his brother's life.
It's also a biblical reference. Cup of Trembling.
Oh yeah, you're right.
But so, any further thoughts, or are you finished up?
He recommended
that was it.
My
I gave
friend.
it a 1.
Okay. Well, I was the one who picked this story.
You already
for us
recommended
to read,
it again,
so
of course.
Obviously I'm giving this a 1. But I think this is a story that everyone should read.
I agree.
It's even if it's just once, even if you never, I think it will leave an impression upon you and at least give you a different way of looking at the world.
For sure.
So I will certainly give this a 1 and move on to Chris.
I'm going to once again reiterate something I said off podcast, but thank you very much for recommending this. I read this when I was 18, first semester in college, when I just started music, before I really learned about jazz and blues and classical and opera, where I was basically playing, pop music on the piano, and my mind was opened up. So reading it now at age 44, and having the musical background that I do, having the life experience I do, this story meant a lot to me. And I remember when I was 18, I was reading the last paragraph, that it was very haunting, and I kept reading it again today. And when I read it, today, I just read the last paragraph like 10 or 11 times, and it was just, it's just such a magnificent piece of work. Sure. I can't recommend this enough. I think it definitely should be read more than once in life. I think you should read it once when you're 18, because when you're in high school, when you're like 16, 17, 18, you've experienced some of life. And then when you read it later in life, or, it's definitely now I've read it, it's probably a story I'm going to keep coming back to. I just can't recommend the story enough. It's just magnificent.
And to finish us off, Scott?
Fair enough. Well, I've given it a high score. I'm going to, yes, recommend it. As I said just briefly, something you just said, Chris, actually, this probably isn't something you're going to like, especially if you're like forced to read it or as part of a curriculum or something. But if you go into it just taking it, not even with a grain of salt, just go into it and be ready to explore, have an open mind to explore another world that's exposed to you and perhaps makes you think about the world itself, then yeah, I recommend it. Like, if you can get that out of it, and I think it does a good enough job of at least trying to present that to you, and if you're, as we like to tout our own praises, we're smart, intelligent enough to do that as well. And yeah, even as an intellectual analysis, the ending scene is so poetic and haunting that it should affect you. Read it.
From a completely technical standpoint, I mean, if you have any interest at all in books, literature, narrative of any kind, this is probably first-person narrative at its most perfect. I think everything we've discussed...
It's definitely excellent.
Yeah.
For sure.
And as such, we gave this a perfect 10 across the board.
Very nice.
And gentlemen, that is what jazz is all about.
Hey, Fair enough. Know what? That is the first MOTS that's a perfect score.
So good on you, dead James Baldwin.
Yes. Cheers to you, James Baldwin.
Cheers to you, James Baldwin.
We'll jazz ourselves out of here right now.
MOTS Ado About Nothing. MOTS Ado About Nothing.
Music and editing by Chris Morgan.
MOTS Ado About Nothing.
This has been a Lost Cinemas production. All rights reserved.